Well, it's been a while since I've made a video, and let's take a look at the things there has been to talk about. There's been more political violence in Boston, along with the aftermath thereof, but I've already talked about political violence and how I condemn it all. There was that solar eclipse. Unfortunately, it rained here, so I was not able to view it. Oh, here we are. James Cameron is in hot water for something he said about Wonder Woman. Well, let's take a look and see what he said that's gotten him in trouble. All of the self-congratulatory back-patting Hollywood's been doing over Wonder Woman has been so misguided. She's an objectified icon, and it's just male Hollywood doing the same old thing. I'm not saying I don't like the movie, but to me it's a step backwards. Sarah Connor was not a beauty icon. She was strong, she was troubled, she was a terrible mother, and she earned the respect of the audience through pure grit. And to me, the benefit of characters like Sarah is so obvious. I mean, half the audience is female. Now, he said this in an interview with The Guardian, and I do have the link below if you want to take a look at that interview yourself. But apparently, this has been getting him in all kinds of trouble, being labeled an anti-feminist and anti-woman and such. But is he? I mean, I personally don't think I would agree that Wonder Woman was a step backwards. But if there was someone in Hollywood who knew how to handle strong women leads, it's James Cameron. Now, he's not the only one to do this, nor was he the first to do it, but take, for example, two of the very large, prominent sci-fi heroine icons that we have. Ripley and Sarah Connor. Both of these were created not by him, but before him. And in fact, in Ripley's case in particular, it was Ridley Scott who gave us the character in the original 1979 movie Alien. And it was unusual that she was the survivor. And I do put it in that term, survivor. Now, she was strong, she was very capable and competent in that movie, and she is the one who ultimately defeated the alien and got out alive, the only one. But in that movie, she was fighting for her life. She was no military expert, or any type of expert for that matter. She was just trying to survive. And the character and role were so good that they inspired Samus Aran in the video game Metroid. And it did come from the first movie, because the video game was released only a month after Aliens came out. So all that inspiration had to come from the Ridley Scott original. But it's that second movie that really did help elevate Ripley as well. She was already strong and up there. She was already considered a classic. But in the second movie, she was given more of a spotlight. She was a bit of the star, and in fact, as you go on, she's the one who's got the experience. She's the one who's seen these before. She's the one who's trying to let everyone know what's happening. And at the very end, she's the one who faces off with the Queen. She's upgraded from survivor to hero, and that was in James Cameron's movie. And the second example, he pointed out himself in his quote, Sarah Connor. To me, Sarah Connor is one of the perfect examples. Even in the first movie, you have a woman who's just a normal woman living her everyday life in Los Angeles when something out of the ordinary tries to kill her. It comes at her for reasons she does not know. She has no way of handling this. She has no way of dealing with this. Something like this is completely unexpected and can never happen. This does put Sarah Connor firmly in the damsel in distress category, but it's appropriate. If a serial killing robot from the future were coming after me, I certainly wouldn't know how to handle it myself either, nor would most of the audience. And so he had help from the future with Reese, who came in. Even at the end of that movie, though, she's fighting back. she is helping out to try to save her own life. And I do believe she is the one who ultimately deals the killing blow. Enter Terminator 2, which is again Cameron's film. Several years have passed. The incidents of the original Terminator have weighed heavily on Sarah Connor, to the point where she is in an insane asylum because of what she firmly believes and everyone else thinks she's crazy. She has gone full militia. She has taken upon herself to learn survival instincts and pass them on to John Connor. She is no longer the damsel in distress. She is the one in charge, prepared, and ready to go. And it is a perfect evolution of her character. Something terrible happened, and now she's reacting to it. And she does a wonderful job in that movie. So we have these two icons, and they were both given to us in part by Cameron. So of all people in Hollywood, he is one who would know how to treat a strong female lead. Enter Wonder Woman. Now, I did see this movie myself, and I'll agree it is actually a good movie. Surprisingly so. It has some issues with it, but most movies do. I will say that in line with current trends, they did hammer a few SJW-ish points. The social justice warrior types. This is the progressive mindset, the intersectionality such. And as I said, it did hammer a few of these points in of putting women in stronger stances than they were at the time and pointing out how unfair it was. And they did that because it was unfair at the time. For example, there's a scene where she is brought into Parliament and people complain because women weren't allowed in Parliament. And she sees that as being inappropriate. Well, the rules have changed since then. This took place during World War I. They were inappropriate. The movie doesn't dwell on these scenes, though. Oh, it hits you over the head with them, but only once, gets it out of the way, and moves on, as it should, if it's going to tackle it at all. The Wonder Woman character herself is a bit different from a lot of superheroes as well. She's not being forced to do the right thing because of some terrible circumstances that have happened to her. She does the right thing because it's the right thing. This is most obviously seen in the No Man's Land scene, which, yes, that name itself is one of the points that it hits you over the head with, not too subtly, but again, doesn't dwell on it. It doesn't, I don't believe it outright said, well, I'm no man, and ran out. She might have, and if she did, I gave it a pass, because I was practically expecting that line. But the scene showed the character, when everyone was telling her, no, you can't do this, we know it's a problem, we know it's bad, but we have a more important mission that has to get done. It's a terrible thing here, but we have to choose. And she decides, this isn't a choice. I can do both of these, so I have a chance to act here and now. I'm going to take it. So she does, even though it has consequences for her actions. It's scenes like that that really helped the character. But I can see where Cameron's coming from in that she's treated like a perfect object. And yes, of course, her beauty is not, well, it's there. It's not particularly highlighted, but they don't shy away from it. But that's Hollywood too. You're not going to get away from that. So I do understand why people are a little upset with it, with what he said. But I honestly think more of the reasons that they're upset, and you'll have to excuse me for being vulgar here, but basically they're just mad at him because he's not sucking Wonder Woman's cock. Metaphorically, of course. He's not bowing down and saying that, oh, this is the greatest thing that's happened. This is proving that women can be strong leads in movies. Because he's been there. Decades ago, he was already pointing this out as a trailblazer. One of them, anyway. Now, I don't get why Wonder Woman is being put on such the pedestal right now. The character has been around since the 30s, and in fact, her creation at the time by, I believe, was Bill Gaines. She was created to give females reading comic books their own hero, much in the way of Superman and Captain Marvel. Not the Captain Marvel you're thinking of, most likely. I'm talking about Captain Marvel, who later became Shazam. A lot of these other very old classic comic book heroes, most of them were fairly strong, square-jawed males. But even back then in the 30s, people saw that, yeah, there's a market here, there's a demographic here, let's do something for it. So they created a new character. And she's had a very successful run since then. She is, in continuity with DC, one of the founding members of the Justice League. She is one of their icons. And it is sad that it took this long for a movie to be made. But I will point out there was a successful television show with her, which several heroes still don't have. Not an animated one either. This was live action, I believe in the 70s, along with Marvel's Hulk. So this isn't a new character. It's not exactly a new concept. We've had female leads in movies before. The thing is, it seems that people right now are trying to push harder and harder for this to be the case, using some sort of historical injustice as validation as to why things have to be this way now, because they've never been this way before. And in doing that, you have to erase things like Ripley and Sarah Connor and James Cameron's own contributions to the subject, among many others. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, for example, although Joss Whedon has been finding himself in hot water with the feminists as well. I once heard somebody complaining that things were better in the 90s, when we had plenty of representation on television. We had The Cosby Show, we had The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, we had women, we had men, we had all walks of life, all skin colors, and people didn't point to them and say, see, this is an example, this is a representation, this is important. They were just people. They just existed. Even back in my childhood, with the television shows that I would watch on Saturday morning in their cartoons, Voltron had the female characters in it, and we collected the same toys. Got them all, didn't matter who was driving the lions. We had Thundercats with Chitara, and you bet we had the Chitara figurines as well with our Lion-Os and Panthros. He-Man had his own counterpart with She-Ra. And yes, she had a toy line, and yes, some of us had the figurines of her to go along with our He-Man as well. These things did exist. They've existed for as long as I can remember, at least. So why are they being treated as new right now? Well, on the flip side, right now, there actually have been some new issues cropping up. And this is one of the few times I'm going to side with some actual feminists and some complaints that they have. One of the reasons Wonder Woman is being seen as such the progression and paragon of what can be is because of how Marvel has been treating Black Widow. Now, they didn't even bring her out until the Avengers, which it's good to actually add characters in that movie as well. Not everybody needed to be set up beforehand. And oh, she was set up wonderfully in that first movie. But a lot of times she was kind of riding on Hawkeye's coattails for that. That was the whole point. The reason that got her involved was because of a man. And then Avengers 2 came around, and a lot of it was about her relationship with Hulk, and not much about her individual. There was the whole background, which they showed of hers a bit, the red in her ledger, but we still haven't gotten her movie. And Marvel seems to think it wouldn't be appropriate to give her a movie. They seem to think that it wouldn't be appropriate to give her a figurine in the toy line. And that decision makes absolutely no sense to me. Because as I've said, yeah, we bought the female dolls too. Action figures. Whatever. We had them when we were kids as well. They've always existed. I don't see why you're excluding them now. So, and Marvel's not the only one on this. DC had an animated show on called Young Justice. It was very well written, very popular, but they canceled it because too many girls were watching it, and girls don't buy the toys. Well, the show had several strong, prominent female characters in it. Of course they would be attracted to this show. You've actually expanded your audience because of the characters you had. And if you had figurines for those characters, they probably would have done pretty well too. Or at least well enough to keep the show alive. Especially if you would continue to promote it this way. Instead, DC panicked and killed the show. Why are they being treated like this? If you make something good, people are going to watch it. They're going to want to have it. They're going to want to be part of it, experience it. It doesn't matter what their demographic is. There's a lot of crossover all the time when something is well written. You can just look at the My Little Pony and the whole brony surge that happened. My Little Pony was, at least in part, founded by the new version, by one of the people who worked on Powerpuff Girls, another one of those shows. But these were shows that were well written for any audience. They didn't necessarily target girls, but of course they didn't ignore them. And even with Powerpuff Girls being, well, the Powerpuff Girls, I still maintain that this was a show for adults, wrapped in the veneer of a child's cartoon. With lines like, "Ich bin ein Townsviller," there is no way that show was geared solely for the children. The parents who were watching it could enjoy it as well. In fact, nearly anyone who was watching could enjoy it. And you see this in other media. When there's a crossover like that, why aren't you trying to capitalize on it? Now, I'm not saying you should change what you're doing to capitalize on it. Just stop trying to divide your demographic and your audience into different factions and saying, no, we don't want this group. We only want this group right here. And this goes in all kinds of directions. It goes for those who say that we need to focus on the male audience. There it goes for those who say we need to focus on the female audience, as the recent Ghostbusters fiasco showed, which caused problems with anybody who was against Ghostbusters only didn't like it because they didn't like the all-female cast. No, a lot of people didn't like it because it just wasn't a very funny movie. Not like the original that had the heart and the chemistry. It didn't matter who was on the screen. It mattered what they were doing and how well they worked together. But I'm not sure if we'll ever be able to get back to those days when we just didn't care. I'm sure there were individuals who were upset about whatever representation. There are always assholes. But that doesn't mean we need to cater to them. It means we should try to do the best we can and not try to single out anyone as being a demographic that's good or a demographic that's bad. Cameron knows how to make strong women characters and has proven so over the decades. To say that he is anti-woman is obscene. Although it is still better than the argument I saw of how Wonder Woman is the 7th highest grossing comic book movie ever. Therefore, it should be taken into consideration when used against the man who has the 2 highest box offices in history. People will never learn. I hope you've enjoyed listening to a longer, rather winding rant and something that's not about violence and true negativity, but there is a message of hope here. Remember, people are individuals, not members of a demographic, and you can appeal to everybody if you do something that's good. Till then, take care, Internet.